I feel like people are going to judge me for the kind of books that I've enjoyed reading. Hey, today we are doing top 5 books you should read before you die. And these are all books I've read before at least once. And this is obviously my opinion. Anyone can have their own opinion. Also, none of these books are like from the 21st century. All of them are at least 20th century or older. So number 5 on my list is a book called Beloved. It's by Toni Morrison, and this book's set in 1870s, and it takes place sort of around like the time of slavery. I don't remember if like slavery still exists. Like it's 1870, 70 something. So like the Civil War's already happened, but I think like slavery is a huge theme in this book, and you'll see it a lot in the imagery and everything they use. And I just gotta say, Toni Morrison, she just died, rest in peace to her, but she has a way with words I have not seen with any other book, and I think that's the most enjoyable part of this book. Sure, it's got a good story, good themes behind it, but overall, this book, you're gonna find like the way she uses words makes you think of an image in such a different way than you would anyway else. But basically, it takes place in the 1870s with a woman named Setha, her daughter Denver, and they end up stumbling on a ghost that they call Beloved. And I'm not going to give away too much of the plot there, because like this thing, if I even describe it a little bit, it's going to like be full of spoilers. But that's basically it. Go check it out. Toni Morrison, great author. I believe Beloved is her best work, and I highly suggest you go read that. So the 4th book I would suggest is a book called Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, and it takes place in the late 19th century. And it's about this girl named Anna, who I don't even think even gets introduced till the very end of part 1 to have the entire book named after her. But like, she's actually really important, so there's a bit of boringness to start out the book, but it gets like really good, really intense, because she's married, but she meets this man named Vronsky. And yes, this book is set all over Russia. There's going to be a lot of Russian names in it. But basically, they really like each other. Anna doesn't really like her husband because she considers her husband boring, I guess, is what... I don't know. But yeah, basically, like, he's a loser. She doesn't love him at all. And Vronsky's this big, manly guy who's so interesting and great. And she's like, I'm gonna cheat on my husband with him. So this entire book is about an affair and the massive side effects and horrible things that happens to both Vronsky and Anna, and both the families involved behind it because of the affair. This one's a pretty heavy read, but if you read some of the more lighter books on this list before getting to this one, then this one is pretty digestible. But it is by far one of the best books I've ever read. I loved reading it with a group, because then we can just talk about how stupid most of the characters are, because no one uses logic in this book, and it's a really great, interesting book to pick up and take a read of. My number 3 book is 1984 by George Orwell. Now, 1984 takes place in 1984, but was published in 1949. So this is during that World War II era, communism spreading and everything. And the idea of this book is, if the Nazis conquered everything and like captured all of Europe, and then went on to take over America and everything, and basically if the Allies lost and the Nazis controlled the entire world. So that by itself is like such an interesting concept, and it's cool to see this dystopian society within this book, and it sort of makes you try to think about like what's going on today, especially with like the parts of like Big Brother, this thing in the book that's like always doing surveillance on people, always watching people and seeing every single move they make, even like basically their thoughts. And we meet this man, and basically his goal is to try to break this illusion of them living in a utopia when they're actually living in one of the most strict, horrible societies, most controlled societies in the world. And it is an extremely interesting book, and I highly suggest picking this one up if you're into that like futuristic wasteland type of stuff, like the original trilogy of Star Wars or something. Sort of like just dystopian futures. That's basically like every single dystopian future kind of thing comes from this book. Like the man in the high castle, one of those. That's basically what inspired 1984 inspired that show. Next up, number 2 on my list. This one was actually my number 1 for such a long time, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird is by Harper Lee and takes place in the 1930s in Alabama, where it is still very, very racist. So when a woman named Mayella accuses a black man of sexual assault, then it goes to court, and we see Atticus, our main, I think he's the main protagonist. Everyone says Scout. Atticus is definitely like the hero of this entire story. But Atticus is a lawyer who decides to take up the case to defend this black man, Tom Robinson, in this case, even though he really knows that no matter what he does, he's going to end up losing. And despite that, he still pulls like every trick out of the bag to show that Tom Robinson is completely innocent. Everyone in the court knows he is innocent, and yeah, you basically have to see what happens from there, because this book does have a pretty strange ending. I still have not read the sequel or prequel, whichever one that came out like in the past couple of years. I've been told not to read it, that it ruins the first book. But yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird, phenomenal book. And then finally we have number 1 on my list. I'm not going to be able to describe this book really good without spoiling a lot of it, but it's called Time's Arrow, and it's by Martin Amis. This book was written in the 90s, I think, and it has the most amazing concept ever. Basically, it's a man who is living his life in reverse, and he starts by waking up from his stroke he had. He died and was in the hospital, and then the ambulance like takes him back to his home, sets him on the ground, and then he slowly starts living life backwards. And it's gross and interesting to see all the different ways that life can be lived backwards. Like every morning you go to eat your food and you like put the spoon up to your mouth and spit the food out and put it back in the bowl, and every single concept that's brought up in this is pretty strange. But honestly, like, I love this book so much, and I've read it 2 times now. I read it the first time like back in April or May of this year, and then I decided to recently pick it back up again. It's a pretty short book. You can get through it actually pretty quickly, and honestly, the way it slowly progresses back and you learn more about this man. Usually, if you're reading a book, it progresses forward and you learn more. But interesting about this one is as you go back, you're learning more and you become more and more shocked by the different things that happens, and it leads up to this pinnacle point that is honestly one of the craziest concepts ever even thought about. And I'll just save it for that and not spoil it. But definitely every single person should read this book. It's probably the most underrated book of all time. I never see it on anybody's list, and I absolutely loved it. So those are my top 5 books you should read in your lifetime. Let me know in the comments a book that you have absolutely enjoyed. I need to start reading more. I've got a lot of homework where I have to read, but I want to start reading for fun again. I read like a lot of the Kingdom Keepers series. I know lots of people haven't read that, but like it's about these kids who are holograms, and just it's weird. But I was like on book 5 when I stopped there, and I know there's a lot more of those, and I really enjoyed reading those. But I want to get back into reading for fun. Anyways, let me know in the comments your favorite books. Definitely check out these. If I would suggest checking out any book on this list, definitely Time Zero. Please check it out, and I will see you in the next video.